All right, guys, what's up? This video should be pretty succinct, straight to the point. This is what you need to know for OSCP. In this video, we will be covering upgrading your shells. This is really important, especially for OSCP, but even if you're not pursuing this, this will be helpful as well. On the OSCP, there's many times where you have shells that are not Meterpreter shells, right? In fact, that's going to be the case most of the time, as you can only use Metasploit once, and unless you're doing buffer overflow or something like that, you're probably not going to have that Meterpreter shell. Instead, you're going to be using something like Netcat, and you're going to be getting a very basic shell that's going to be very annoying to use in its current state without upgrading it, right? Because you won't be able to tab autocomplete, you won't be able to up arrow, you won't be able to, it will be very, sometimes you'll even have like where things are really difficult to read on the screen. It's just not formatting stuff correctly. And that's going to be a huge pain point for you if you don't know how to upgrade your shell. So this shouldn't be a very lengthy video, but this will be a very important thing to understand. So I've set up a little demo here just on my local machine because it all starts with getting a shell. The first thing you do, you have your listener, your Netcat listener, right? Or whatever you're choosing to use as a listener. And then you have like your exploit. Maybe this is through exploiting a web app, or maybe this is through a web shell, or whatever the case. And basically you want to spawn a shell. Now actually spawning the shell, that's a whole nother matter. We'll cover that in another video, but just know that here is where this would be what I would be doing on the victim machine to connect back to my listener, right? So if we just run, if we just go ahead and run this, right, we'll get a connection here. And I can start running stuff. ID, who am I? But, this is not the best shell to have. I can't tab autocomplete, right? So, like, let's do an LS, right? Let's say cat Narnia. See, look, I hit tab, and it will not autocomplete that. So, what I can instead do is run a series of commands that will upgrade my shell and allow me to get all this functionality that I would like to have, right? So one of the easiest ways, there's a few ways to do it, and I'll show you how, but one of the easiest ways is to first use Python to go ahead and spawn a bash shell, right? And so you can do Python -C to give like an inline command, right? And we're going to do we're going to do an import here first. We're going to import a library called, or a module, I should say, right? Called pty. And then we're going to do a pty.spawn. Okay? And we're going to tell it to spawn bash, which is located in bin. Okay? So bin bash. And then we're going to close out the single quotes there as well. So once we do that, we may have crashed it here, it looks like. Oh no, this is what our shell looks like here. So now we can see that we have access to this here. But we still can't tab autocomplete. See, that's the issue. We now have ourselves a nice bash shell. It's got the colors and all of that stuff, which is nice. But, and even like, we can't even move over. We can't even arrow over. See, it enters in all this junk, right? So we've improved our shell, but it's still not where we want it to be. So one thing I'll mention really quickly is there's going to be times where Python might not be on the system, because this relies on the target system having Python installed. If it doesn't, there's a Python 3 command that you can run, which is pretty much the same thing, but with Python 3. And that's what it looks like. So go ahead and put these in your notes if you don't have them there already. This is the Python 3 variant here. We're still basically doing the same thing, an inline command. We're importing the pty module and using the spawn method and spawning bin bash. But in this case, the Python 2 way worked just fine, so we're good there. There's a few other ways to do this. You could do this with Perl as well. I haven't had to do this too often, but it's something that I have made note of. If you have to do it with Perl, say there's no Python 2 or Python 3 on the system, but the system has Perl, you can still do this. This is the syntax here with the backticks here, the -E flag. All right. And in the case where that's not available either, there is a way to do it with some other technologies like Node.js. This one's a pretty long one, I'll just warn you right now. But if you do it with Node, this is the command to do that. And pretty soon I'll be releasing my notes for absolute free on my channel. So don't worry if you don't want to type all this out. If you get my notes that I've accumulated over the last 5 years, if you go and get that for free once that's available, it should be available later this week, then you can get all these commands and so much more. Yeah, there's a way to do it with Ruby as well. You want to go into Ruby and you can do this command here. And once you have it running, you should be able to run commands with this syntax. Or let me just show you the notes that I have on Ruby here. Now keep in mind, I'm just including this to help you guys out a little bit extra. But I think I've had to use this maybe one time. But here's the notes I have on the Ruby thing. You know, you should be able to run commands with it using the backticks and then whatever command you want to run. So, for example, uname to run uname. This is the Ruby way. I've only probably ever used it once in 5 years of doing this. But most of the time, the Python way, this way specifically here, this will work, I would say 95% of the time. The other 3% of the time, you need to do the Python 3 way. And then the remaining 2% of the time, you might need Perl or Ruby or Node. I think I used Node once. But, okay, now here is, I'm going to go ahead and show you what's going on here, because this might get a little bit difficult to follow when you watch me do this live. So I'm going to go ahead and open Cherry Tree. And these are the commands that I'm going to be running. This is how I'm going to get the autocomplete and all the other stuff that we're still lacking, okay? I'm going to hit Control-Z. I'm going to type stty size, and I'm going to type stty raw minus echo. And then you're not going to be able to see me type this. It's going to look like it's invisible because I'm going to be in the background. I'm going to type FG for foreground. Then I'm going to type reset. And it's going to ask me what terminal type. I'm going to say screen. And then I'm going to export term equals screen, so that we can clear the screen with a Control-L if we so choose. Okay? So I just wanted to put that up here so you guys know exactly what I'm going to be running. I'm about to show you live, but it might be difficult to follow. So I'm going to hit Control-Z. Okay? That exits me out of that instance here. And I'm going to say stty size. Okay? I'm just going to get the size. And then stty raw minus echo. And don't worry about memorizing this. Put this in your notes if you don't have it already, or just wait on my notes to come out. You'll get all this and more, like I was saying. And now here's where you can't see it. I'm going to type FG for foreground. I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to type reset because things are all screwed up right now, right? I reset. And okay, here, this time it didn't prompt me for a terminal type screen. But one thing I can do here is term equals screen. Okay. And yeah, now that I've done that, I should be able to autocomplete and all that. So let's try this again. Boom. I can now tab autocomplete. And I can up arrow. And I can left arrow, right arrow, I can move around, and I can Control-L to clear the screen, right? So now I have access to all the functionality that I would normally get with SSH and any terminal that I'm used to, right? So we have effectively upgraded our shell just like that. Do that every time. Every time you have a shell that you get through Netcat or something that's not super fancy like a interpreter shell, run these commands, get your shells upgraded, and have a much easier time. Focus all of your stress, save your stress and heartache for the actual difficult things. That way you can just breeze through this, and that'll free you up to focus on the harder stuff and get more root shells. So hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. If so, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button to help get the message out there, and I will see you guys in the next video.